Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Power Play and Data Innovation, How the NHL and VAST Data Revolutionized Media Operations. Thank you all so much for joining today. We look forward to this content and we hope that you all do too. I'm going to introduce to you our speakers. Today, we have Derek Kennedy from the NHL. He's Vice President of Media Operations and DevOps. Thank you so much, Derek, for being here today. We also have Andy Pernsteiner. He's Field CTO for VAST Data. And thank you, Andy, for being here today. I will turn it over to you all to kind of go on and introduce yourself some more. But again, thank you, everyone, and we look forward to sharing this content with you.
Thanks so much, Analia. Looks like my name's missing some characters. It looks much easier to spell. Hi, everyone. As Analia mentioned, I'm Field CTO here at VAST. I've been here about 7 years now, almost to the day. And I'm super excited to be joined by Derek because we've been working together on things for, I don't know, how long, Derek? How many years have we been working together?
I think it might even predate VAST for a year or two, but yeah, for the last 5 years at least.
Awesome. Well, why don't you, I guess, give us a little sense on sort of what you do at the NHL, and kind of some of the work that you do and how it might impact how, your fans and everyone interact with the content that you make.
Sure. So I manage our media operations group and our DevOps group. So I mean, a lot of it surrounds data moving, data pipelines, and our infrastructure builds. I mean, for this conversation, we're obviously focused a little bit more on the media operations side. So in that world, it's managing the infrastructure and the applications that run our digital archive. It's also our technical operations center that does all of our live game streaming for both partners, external partners, internal uses, etc.
Wow, that's awesome. And so when you say media operations and content, like what kinds of data are you guys collecting and distributing and processing?
So right now, at our, for say a live game event, we have our traditional broadcasts that we distribute to, our any digital platforms. That could be international partners. It could be our rights holders, ESPN, Turner, and Rogers in Canada, Rogers Sportsnet. In addition, we also have proprietary camera angles in our venues that are used. Some are used in broadcasts, you'll see, and others are for internal uses. And it's more kind of working on an orchestration platform to kind of build those workflows, that take, wherever the source video exists. And sometimes that's offsite, sometimes it's in a venue, and, making sure we're getting those in a variety of methods to, other partners. And then on the other side, it's, kind of the during game, after game is ensuring that any of the content that we archive on a night-to-night basis, and any of the, projects done by our NHL productions crew, that all of that content is flowing into a media archive, and we have we're providing them a platform to assign metadata to it, and make sure it's getting to its proper final locations for us, whether it's VAST obviously is our primary location, and in our New York office, or in our our kind of our backup copy that lives in the cloud.
Wow, amazing. You mentioned archive for a moment. How much footage are we talking about? How far back does your archive go?
I mean, we've digitized some film reels that date back to the 30s, 40s, and obviously, right through current day. I think we really started to, I think our, having a true catalog of every game starts around, more in the mid 90s. So from there on, is we more or less have a copy of each game, and whatever additional assets that might be associated with it, whether it be shoots by film crews or the melts that occur after the game, which are the string together of all the topical highlights for that game.
Gotcha. And I guess speaking of archive, I know that we had worked with you on a project to do some migration of your archive. Maybe if you could describe a little bit about what you were doing in terms of archival, and then how you've been transitioning that to a new way of archiving.
Sure. I mean, I think with like many other media companies, and we have more or less a media company or group within the league. We were writing, say a petabyte a year of video data, and we're writing, two copies to LTO, and then storing some on cache for a certain amount of time, usually about a month or two. So and then we'd have the secondary copies on LTO, and then once the cache version expired, everything had to go back to LTO tape. And we in our offices here, we had a 4400 slot LTO tape library. And it's
just for people's benefit, because I don't know if everybody understands tape. So you have LTO, you have 4400 tapes, and how much space is that occupying? Like, what does that look like if you had to imagine it or describe it for somebody?
I mean, I would say it's probably about in length, probably about 15 feet long, and about 8 feet high, just a row of cabinets. So I think it's about 12 cabinets, but say that takes up probably 15 feet of space in our data center, and that also may be 4400 slots, but we have many more tapes than that. So one of the other issues that we've run into is we've had a user that would request a piece of footage from our media archive manager, our MAM, and they'd go to request and restore that piece of footage and get an alert to saying that tape is offline, and that footage would not be able to be restored. So what happens there is then a request and would have to get made to our our archive group, and they would have to go find whatever tape was not in that LTO tape library, insert it, and then have the user rerun the job.
Was it
So that
just like in the same building, or is it somewhere else they had to go get it?
we would keep a copy offsite, but we have a copy of everything on site. So while it was not a tremendous amount of time that it might take to get a tape back online, there's considerations like business hours and not being staffed 24/7. So there's just there's always a delay if a piece of footage, and the farther back you go, it might be harder to find. The chances of you having to get a tape and put it back online were greater. So we looked at it, and we've had this tape robot, and it's been reliable for almost 10 years now, something like that. And the decision, there comes a time to make a decision of what are you going to do next? Like, are you going to replace that robot? And obviously we had previously done some work with you guys, and that's when we started discussing what could be next. And the idea came up was expanding our current VAST cluster and writing everything to disk, and and also obviously a copy elsewhere, but then also enabling all of our content to be available at all times. And that was like just the initial phase, and it's something that is an ongoing project. Writing merely 20 petabytes off LTO tape takes
Takes a little while.
years. Yeah, depending on how fast you can go. So that's still an ongoing process. We're pretty well into it. But that's kind of the idea of what we had. And at the end is like, we've got this great data platform. Let's just take all of our assets, our video assets. We have video, we have photos, we have statistical documents, and let's make those that are all within our asset management system. So let's make those all available at all times.
Yeah, and so I guess what kinds of things do you feel like your editors or the rest of your I guess your customer, the people who ask you for assets, How do you feel like that makes their life better?
Well, it first of all just takes the obvious step out of, like, it doesn't matter when or where they're working. They know that, the piece of content they may need in a pinch, and then, that can be editors, that can also be our rights holders that have access to portions of our archive, that they're able to pull that content whenever it's needed. And I think that's probably a pretty good assurance, that, in the world we're in, for, the demand for content, is that, like, there's not going to be a scenario in the future where, oh my goodness, I'm putting together this, some incredible moment, rare moment happened in a game that hasn't happened since, 1989, and they want to put something, our content group, our NHL productions group wants to put something and publish something on any of our platforms. Like, there's a guarantee that, as long as we have that footage, they won't have to, question whether it's going to be available to them. So I think, that, providing that, assurance that, the content that we own and that we have in our archive will always be available to them. And I think that's a pretty valuable use.
That's awesome. And I guess just to remember the numbers here, so you had 4,400 slots in your tape library, and you say that represented about 20 petabytes plus or minus.
Yeah, it's probably a little less than that, but let's call it 20 petabytes within a couple of years anyway, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you're migrating that all onto the VAST platform that you guys have, and that system is sitting in your New York data center.
Yes.
Amazing. By the way, for those of you who haven't been there, they have an amazing view from their offices of New York. Well, cool. Now, I guess, maybe I'll take a step back for a moment, because, VAST has been working with the NHL for about 6 years now, actually, I think, when we first started launching a product. And initially, I think you guys were using it for edit, where, your editors would work on content, and now you're migrating in all this archival data. What other kinds of things do you think about when you think about using VAST? Not all the future stuff, but even just like the day-to-day stuff.
Um, I think, on a day to day, I mean, I guess we can kind of talk about how we've, how we've expanded. We had a single cluster, and then, we had another decision to make over the last year, about what to do in our arenas. And, we had, traditional consumer storage at our arenas that we would write archival copies of our broadcasts and our melt assets to. And, we were forced to make a business decision of, like, what do we want to do to replace that storage that had served us well for 5-6 years. And, the idea of really kind of trying to take a step forward and future proof ourselves for many years, and recognizing the success we've had with the VAST platform, and some of the additional functionalities about having the VAST data space, and connecting our 32 arenas with our other existing clusters, and those clusters being able to see the same data, all each other's data for the most part, was really enticing. We said it before, the demand for content and the immediacy of content generation is kind of really what you have to strategize for. So we had a lot of extensive conversations with you guys, and having the idea of taking workloads, say, of transferring footage from an arena to our New York offices to be used by our, NHL productions group. Previously had been, done by a, third party, file transfer service. And, VAST offered the ability to just use, essentially native replication, and, not wait for the end of the game and then push a terabyte plus of content, but, like, have that content be, the moment there's new bits sitting on a storage system, we start writing that back to our offices. And we've written, almost using replication, we've written almost all the data of those archive files by the time the game ends.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you have all these arenas, and so now, at least I think, yeah, as of now, there is a VAST cluster installed in each and every NHL arena. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yes. All we have one still pending, but yes.
One lingering one sitting out there,
Yes.
yeah. And so and basically, when there's a game that's in progress, there's cameras that you guys own and manage that are recording, and those get recorded to the VAS that's sitting in each of these different arenas. And sometimes there's games happening at the same time in a bunch of different arenas at the same time. And then as that data is written there, it starts appearing in the New York data center, so that if you have editors who are trying to do something, they can do something without having to wait for someone to copy the data over. Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah, that's what we can do right now. Our use case is as you mentioned, writing our broadcast archive files back to New York. And the real win there was, again, not waiting post game to transfer a terabyte. Is more or less a terabyte's nearly written by the time our encoders are turned off. So that means that we can begin any of our automation and our processing of chunking our source video files, um, within 30 minutes of a game. And reality is, like, we didn't start any of that until 3-something hours post game in previous years. So having that ability to continuously write that data to initiate our video sub clipping, transcoding, processing far earlier than we ever have before. And we were able to, I think, out of the box when we tested replication, we were more or less able to write, I think it was we had 9 gigabits a second just on our initial tests. So obviously we had to do some tuning on that because we have other use cases that go on our venues. But the ability to move content at that speed and make that available to whatever automation we have on the New York end has been a tremendous win for us. And especially as the demands have increased.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. When I was first talking with our engineering team about it, and then with you guys about it, and it was pretty ambitious, right? You take a VAST system to install it in every single arena. There's a lot of logistics involved, and then just for fun, like when you were describing at some point some of the locations, because it's not like these venues, it's not like these stadiums have proper data centers, right? So like, just maybe tell everybody like one of the more interesting locations. You don't have to reveal which location it is, but just like one of the more interesting situations where we have to install equipment in.
I mean, luckily we have a tremendous arena operations group, and they've really, over the last couple of years, sourced out far more ideal conditions for a lot of our rack spaces. But there are some that have been recently moved that they were that live in on the suite level that was carved into the wall, like a rack that was carved into the wall. So it was one of our first discussion points when we talked about moving it into the venue, into the arenas, was see, some of these conditions are not ideal. These are multi-purpose venues. They're not, we don't own these venues, and there's all sorts of environmental conditions that we have to prepare for, because again, there's hundreds of events at these things, and each team gets 41 games plus playoffs at these venues. So there's a lot of other use cases and conditions you have to, that the venues have to accommodate, and that we have to prepare for as well. So they've been all over, and we've luckily been able to move a lot into more traditional, data center environments. But there are also some that aren't, and there are times where there's building maintenance. It's not a data center, like we said. So there are times, the building has to perform maintenance, and, we have to, these clusters have to be flexible and, brought down, and, sometimes at minutes notice. So it's not ideal, but it is been reassuring that the clusters have been able to sustain in these environments.
Yeah, and I remember one of the ones, I can't remember the location, but we had to accommodate for the fact that every so often there's like a monster truck show at one of the venues, and so you have to cover the racks and make sure the dirt doesn't get in.
Yeah, more than a few, so that's always a good example of some of the challenges that arise when you're in a multi-purpose venue like that. It's not a
Yeah,
baseball stadium or a football stadium where like the events outside of those games are a little fewer and farther between. So there's always a few more challenges that we encounter. So,
yeah,
and
I
I guess
get
we should
you.
also mention we have purchased a couple of your hardened fly packs for future use as well, and kind of evolving some, when we go off site to, outdoor arenas or whatever sort of environments we're prepared for. We're also going to start taking probably in the coming year or two, take some VAST clusters on the road with us, which will be exciting and intriguing to maneuver as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fun. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go and help with any of those installs. I was busy with some other stuff, but I kind of want to go check a few of them out at some point.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of talk our audience through a little evolution here. So when we began life with the NHL, VAST and the NHL, we started with some basics. You guys actually were instrumental in helping us to refine our initial implementation of the Windows file sharing protocol, the SMB file sharing protocol. Basically, at VAST, we like to build things that customers want, and that was something that you needed and wanted, and we hadn't originally planned to do it as soon as we did, but then you were so eager to work with us, so then we did it. And thanks for being a partner through that. Our VAST engineering team is super grateful for all the feedback that you give us and optimizations that you help us to make and everything. And then you started using it for sort of day-to-day purposes, and we got the idea to create an archive where you could migrate all of your archive off of your tape libraries onto a VAST platform. And then, if we evolve further, now we have installations at every arena. So we started out just doing what we call the data store, which is how you can store data. And then we extended it so that you're using it alongside with the data space, which basically allows all these clusters to tie together and bring all the data back to your core hub in New York. I wanted to talk about a few of the next things that we've been working on together. And I think the audience might realize obviously that metadata in some cases is as important as the data. And one of the projects that I feel like I'm interested in working with you directly on is finding a good way to catalog the metadata in a more sort of automatic fashion. And so just, again, for those of you that don't know VAST so well, we have a built-in metadata catalog for all file and object assets that go into the platform. It's built on our own created database, and it's very scalable and makes it easy for people to find metadata. And I think at first, Derek, you guys were, just using basic metadata, and we're starting with the basics. But if the example I have on the screen here is, some common metadata that you might find about an asset, maybe a hockey game. But I guess tell us about, metadata and how you use it, not necessarily with VAST, and what the challenges are that you might have with, tracking things down or finding things.
Yeah, I think it's something I probably missed earlier, but as part of this LTO tape migration, and also with all assets that we're archiving moving forward, the initial implementation of the VAST database was as we are writing these assets off of LTO tape and onto VAST and into the cloud, we're utilizing the S3 protocol. So when we write either archival assets or new assets that arrive to us on a nightly basis, we're using the same tags on VAST and in S3. So that really gives us the flexibility to essentially point in either direction where we would retrieve them, and we're using the same, you'd be using the same calls, right? And you'd be requesting the same tags. And I think that's tremendous value, that you're not just sorting by a file name anymore. We can query the VAST database directly and say, show me all of these assets with the New York Rangers tag that from 2010, and that was a melt. And so while there still has to be, those are back end calls, right? But like the ability to retrieve assets, in a programmatic way like that, is really valuable, and something we'll continue to do, and additionally and ideally augment with additionally enriched data, when we talk about locations, or a lot of our high level top game level data, locations, what the maybe you even can talk about final scores or something like that, of just really kind of building an object around making each asset an object with a lot of contextual data associated with it, and then obviously being able to link and associate other assets based on the data that we're writing to the database. So,
and I guess I'm wondering, how do you, like you mentioned a lot of this extended metadata that you're putting into S3 tags, but somebody has to put that in, or do you have processes that automatically generate that metadata? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So prior, when we were, archiving to LTO, we would in our MAM have the existence of essentially of our game schedule. So what we did is when we started to write these assets, to VAST and S3, we would initially we said, all right, well, let's take the object that is a game and these associated files, and let's take that object, and when we write out a file, we're calling over to our MAM and requesting all that top level game data. So it's automated. Like we have our application that is migrating to VAST and LTO, and when that selects an asset to migrate off of LTO, it looks at the MAM data and says, all right, let me retrieve, we selected 12 fields or 10 fields, whatever the, essentially the max amount of tags that are allowed. And, let's select those ones that really mean something, that at least allows us to, refine and sort in a decent manner without getting too granular, and allow for the ideas of, also possibly permissioning on tags as well. And like, let's bring those and really focus in on those 12. And every time we have an asset written to each, written to both places, that we're assigning those tags. And for everything going forward, that same process takes place. It looks at essentially our game schedule, and it says, all right, well, let me grab those tags that are necessary, that are associated. This, if it's a game file, it's associated with the game. And, there's some obvious automated data we can assign and associated with it. When you're talking about more contextual content that's produced by our studios group, we'll do some metadata application prior to archiving. So we provide it with a little bit more context. But even then, when you look at date ranges, you can say, like, we know this content was based on a file name, or a date range was produced for this season, right? Like every we have a calendar year, that's essentially a season. So we can associate at the baseline of like a piece of content that was produced that's not game related. We can say, well, at least we know, it was this feature that was done in this season, and we'll add the tag, Boston Bruins, New York Rangers to associate with it. So we get some baselines, and that at least kind of sets us, on a path for our next, goals of and further enriching that. But at least getting the data that we have already, and starting there, and then obviously kind of moving to a next phase where we really try to dig in on that as well.
Let me make sure I understand the process. So you have all these assets, they're sitting on an archive, on a tape archive, and you're migrating over to VAST, and then you have information about those assets in a separate database and a media asset manager that's on the side. And so that your process is you go and when you're pulling an asset out of the archive, you're also grabbing the metadata out of the MAM or the asset manager. You're choosing a certain subset of the field. You're not taking all of them out of the asset manager. Because I know that the AWS S3 implementation has a limit on the number of tags you can put in. By the way, our limit's higher, but then of course you have to decide if you want it to work on both, right? I actually do have some thoughts on some other things that could be done to pull more of that metadata in, even in Amazon. So we can talk about that separately. But and then once you have that metadata, then when you push the object into the VAST object store, and when you're pushing it out to AWS, now that metadata is just with the object. And on VAST, you can go and search for things because we index all that metadata. And so then that way, instead of having these different sources of truth where you have the MAM over here and you have the files and the objects over there, now you have everything kind of encapsulated into one package so that even if the MAM disappears, if it burns down in a fire, everything that's contained with the object itself, it gives you enough metadata to already know something about that asset. Does that sound about right?
100%. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that was the goal
Awesome.
going into that exercise.
No, and it's super fun to think about metadata sometimes. I know it might be boring to some people, but if you think about what life is like as a person who sits behind a computer all the time, you're always searching for something, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's searching for a file or searching for an email or searching, everybody's always searching for something. It gets harder and harder the more stuff you have. But if you can have a way to easily encapsulate all the things that you care about that data, and then have an easy way to search for it, like, I mean, that's where it's at now. And at some point you and I can chat about some front ends we could put in front of our catalog. Like, I'm working on some projects related to doing sort of AI based text to SQL processing, so you can just type in things like, find me all the Stanley Cup games, and hit enter, and then it'll just find all of them for you, because you're not having to write a SQL query to find it. It's just you're asking it a simple question. It's actually surprisingly easy to set these things up these days, which kind of brings me to sort of the next topic, which is, so we'll just, we'll rewind a bit. We start out with a data store where you're storing all the data. Then we have the data space where you're able to tie together all the arenas. Now we're talking a little bit about the database, where we're storing all of these metadata attributes and making it really easy to search on them. And then there's a new thing that we're working on, which is our data engine. And recently we made an announcement where we're releasing something called the Insight Engine. It's going to come out later this year. And I'll give the audience a little sneak preview on the idea behind it, which is basically that, VAST has been a place where you can store data of all types, all kinds of different data, whether it's unstructured and now structured data. We're actually going to be announcing a way to store streaming data as well in our upcoming release that comes out very soon. But all of this is building towards something, which is the ability to not only have data stored somewhere, but also to have the processing happen in a very intelligent and cohesive way that doesn't have to be managed by people gluing together different bits and pieces, right? So, a lot of people out there in the world of ML ops and DevOps, they're building pipelines and they're maintaining separate systems to tie together. And we're trying to make that much simpler and much more efficient. And so, one of the things we're going to be working with you on, of course, is trying to, help you use this technology as we release it. But I guess I'm wondering, from your standpoint, let's imagine that you had a platform where all of your data was, all your metadata that's associated with it was, and you had the ability to generate sort of pipelines that were native to the platform, even just for basic stuff. Like, what kinds of things would you use that for?
Well, I think what you kind of keyed on it earlier, and it was also, another really driving decision for us when we, talked about our arenas and our venues, was that, like, the idea of bringing workloads to the data platform and not having it sit either with a third party, or that you're, or you're spinning up new infrastructure just to, create workloads that, that are obviously useful, but, given the ability for us to put those on the platform, or as closest to the platform of the data as you can get, was obviously a really big part of that. And, whether that's, automating our, the replication that we do night to night, or, as we discussed, of, doing some, some video transcoding potentially, on a cluster, like you have the workload right there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's super intriguing to us. And then, like, the next part is, like, as you said, like the intelligent decisions behind that automation. And I think that's what we're, obviously really excited and intrigued about next. So, I think in terms of, different ideas that we've had, I think it's a lot of it kind of starts off at some of our, our nightly operations and continuing to leverage the arena clusters to generate content, and whether that's using an identifier that says this is the end of the period, and shipping video noted by our game data, that is the end of the period, or it's our puck and player tracking data that says, okay, well, we have all these proprietary cameras, like let's automate the generation of the 6 different angles of this goal, based on these feeds that we're writing out to VAST, and being able to leverage the data and the puck and player tracking data, are the simpler game data to generate additional assets, and make decisions on maybe what feed is used, because we know that there's not going to be, based on where the goal was scored and what the location on the ice and the coordinates on the ice, that we only need to generate a clip based on from these 3 out of 5 cameras, rather than all 5. And that's something.
Let's talk about this puck and player tracking thing for a second. Sorry to interrupt you. Like, because you've been talking about it for a bit with me, and I don't know if I've fully gotten into the weeds with you on it, but I think yesterday when I saw you, or day before when I saw you, you were mentioning like the number of data points that you get, and now I can't remember the number, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what this puck and player tracking is, and the scale at which you're collecting this data, and then what you guys are starting to use it for.
I mean, I think a lot of it is, really, our starting use cases is for our analytics groups and stuff like that. Our insights, the insights that are provided when you watch a broadcast and you see that some of the AWS insights, face-off probability, and a few others, shot predictability, I think, and it's a lot of it is to generate those those deeper views of the game, that haven't been able to be haven't really been seen before, and create additional interesting storylines. And
are there sensors in the puck, or how are you doing puck tracking?
So there's sensors in the puck, and there's a tag on every player's jersey, and they're generating. It's a tag that located on their shoulder, that's generating that data, and then there's also optical data that we're starting to look at as well.
Is that in cameras, or do they have different sensors that you use for that?
Those would be like camera based. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you know where the puck is, and I mean, I'm assuming you're tracking it in real time. Like, how many data points are you generating from a single game with all of this stuff?
I don't have a precise number, but several millions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's intense. And so, good news is that, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're going to start allowing for streaming data to be piped directly in. And you may already have some solutions for this, but now you have an option to be able to persist it directly to VAST, and then have it be instantly queryable using a VAST database platform. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. And I guess, I'm always super psyched about new ways of looking at data, and also just thinking about the concept of tracking the movements of every player and the puck, and marrying it together with the footage. And I don't know. I mean, ultimately, your goal is to kind of enrich the fan experience, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone is always looking for another view of the game, and unique views, and the name of this game right now is content delivery, and that's not a shock to anyone, obviously. So providing new views and new ways of looking at the game, new perspectives, to generate that fan excitement is why you continue to we're continuing to strive to evolve and advance our content delivery. So
can you talk maybe for a second or two about like any of the actual implementations of fan experience improvement? Like if I'm a fan and I go to a game, or if I'm watching from home, like what new cool stuff have you thrown my way in the last year or two?
Uh, I mean, I think some of the views, the camera views that have come in, whether we've put them in, or others have. I think, like we talked about earlier, the insights, that are shown during a game, and the tracking of players, and showing how a player approaches a particular, a particular play, and how they position themselves, or there's a it's not like any other sport where there's, it's not baseball or football where there's like a play, there's a pitch, or there's a play. It's pretty
Yeah.
fluid, so it is probably a little bit more difficult to tell those stories. But a lot of those, utilizing a lot of that tracking data, I think has really helped the content generators show different viewpoints and experiences for fans across the
Oh,
board.
that's awesome. No, that's it's really cool. Are there any other things that you'd want to share with everybody out there?
Uh, no, I'm not sure. Nothing comes to mind. We're obviously excited to continue to continue to evolve, and really kind of create content, content hubs, in all of our locations, and again, like we said, the idea is, of every hub being able to see the data that the other one has, and to be able to retrieve it is, within reason of providing what views you want to allow it to see, another cluster C is obviously what excites us, and obviously further enriching our content with metadata is the obvious next step. And I think we've really kind of built the foundation, and done it in a methodical way that when we get there and we're ready to really kind of lean into some of the the intelligence, and the learning that we can do off of our archive. Like we're in a pretty strong position right now to do so. And the most important part is making sure for us is like being able to present and feed the data we already have, in our existing historical data of statistics, or logging data that we have from our productions group, and making sure that we've positioned that to feed it, and make that available to make all that learning that we're hoping to do in the future possible.
Well, great. And thanks again for sort of going through this journey with us. It's been really fun, and I'm pretty excited about all the next things we're going to do together. We got a lot we're working on our side, and hopefully you're able to take advantage of everything, because we're super excited to build it. And I guess the other thing I'll just mention really quickly is, if you ever want a demo of the VAST data platform, we have sort of weekly live demos every Tuesday and Thursday. And then something that's not on these slides that we're going to do a little bit more announcing around is, we've created we've collaborated on a community around AI, especially called the Cosmos. If you go to thecosmos.ai, we're developing a portal there, and we're collaborating with lots of different partners, and some of our customers, and we'll start to have self-service live demos there for anybody who wants to try it out. So everybody can tune in when we broadcast that. But thanks, Derek, for taking the time today. I have this big gigantic pair of funky headphones on because I'm about to walk into a data center and check out one of the biggest clusters we've ever built. It should be fun. So thanks so much.
Enjoy that, and thanks for having me. It's always a lot of fun talking with you, Andy. So
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy and Derek. Thank you everyone for joining us. And thanks, Andy, for that live demo plug and Cosmos.ai plug. Yeah, reach out to us at VAST Data. Thank you guys again, and have a great day.
Thanks.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.